I started Cinderella Gray expecting spectacle. Fast races, dramatic rivalries, and an exaggerated sports story built around a premise that should have been difficult to take seriously. What I did not expect was to care this much about why these girls were running. Somewhere between Kasamatsu, the national stage, and the final race against Tamamo Cross, the series stopped feeling like a story about winning. It became a story about what people do when moving forward costs them something. That is the part I love most about Cinderella Gray. Every important race carries an emotion that began long before the starting signal. A promise, a regret, an old injury, a fear of being left behind, or the knowledge that one final chance is disappearing. The runners do not simply become faster when those emotions surface. They become more honest. For a few seconds, everything unnecessary falls away, and the only thing left is the reason they refuse to stop. At the center of all of it is Oguri Cap. She first appears almost too quiet to understand, like someone whose body speaks more clearly than her face ever could. She eats, she trains, and she runs with a simplicity that makes her seem naturally unstoppable. But the more we learn about her, the more important that simplicity becomes. Running is not ordinary to Oguri. It is something she was never guaranteed to have. When Oguri was young, her legs were weak enough that walking itself was difficult. Her mother stayed beside her and helped her take one step at a time until those uncertain movements slowly became something stronger. That history changes the meaning of every race that follows. When Oguri runs, we are not only watching a gifted athlete use her talent, we are watching someone enjoy a freedom that once seemed impossible. That is why her backstory affected me so much. Cinderella Gray never needs to turn Oguri into a constantly emotional character for us to understand her. Her gratitude lives inside the act itself. She does not have to explain how precious running is every time she enters a track. We already know that the girl now, passing everyone at impossible speed, was once a child learning how to trust her own legs. The series could have used that backstory as a simple reason for us to feel sorry for her. Instead, it becomes the foundation of her strength. Oguri is not powerful despite the fragile child she used to be. She is powerful because that child never disappeared. Somewhere inside, every victory is the memory of the first step. And somewhere inside, every defeat is the fear that moving forward may not always be enough. That fear becomes real in Kasamatsu, when Oguri is forced to choose between the place that gave her a beginning and the future waiting beyond it. Kitahara discovers her, believes in her, and begins imagining what they might achieve together. His dream becomes connected to hers so quickly that separating them feels cruel. But the better Oguri becomes, the clearer it is that Kasamatsu may no longer be large enough for what she can become. The choice is presented almost like a race with an unbearable condition. If Oguri wins, she leaves for the central circuit. If she loses, she stays. On paper, it sounds simple. For Oguri, it means that running with all her strength could take her away from the people she loves. Winning would become a form of abandonment, while losing would protect everyone except the person she might have become. So, Oguri hesitates. The girl who normally runs without complication is suddenly carrying the weight of everyone watching her. She does not want to betray Kitahara, March, or Kasamatsu. Her loyalty begins pulling against her ability. And for once, The greatest obstacle in front of Oguri is not another runner. It is the possibility that her own success will hurt the people who made it possible. Then, Kitahara understands what he has done. He realizes that he has placed his dream on her shoulders and called it a choice. He could remain silent and keep Oguri close. He could let her slow down, lose the race, and preserve the future he once imagined for both of them. Instead, he chooses the one thing that will almost certainly separate them. He shouts for her to run. "Ta, Shiri, Oguri." That moment stayed with me because Kitahara is not asking her to win for him. He is giving her permission to outgrow him. He accepts that loving her future means losing his place beside her, at least for now. The shout feels powerful because it contains both pride and pain. He wants to remain her trainer, but he wants Oguri to become everything she can be even more. Oguri begins running like herself again, and the result is inevitable. She wins. Yet the scene never feels like a simple triumph, because victory confirms that she has to leave. Cinderella Gray understands that growth can be beautiful and painful at the same time. Sometimes the person who believes in you most is the person who has to open the door and watch you disappear through it. That is one reason the series feels more emotional than many sports anime. Its biggest moments are rarely about power alone. They are about the cost of using that power honestly. Oguri could have stayed in a place where she was already loved and celebrated. Instead, she moves toward a world where her talent will be challenged, restricted, and sometimes treated like a problem. That becomes obvious when she reaches the national stage and discovers that being good enough does not mean being allowed to compete. Oguri wants to enter the Japanese Derby, but the registration deadline has already passed. She can defeat the runners in front of her, but she cannot outrun a rule written before anyone expected a regional outsider like her to matter. The conflict with Symboli Rudolph is important because neither side can solve it easily. Rudolph recognizes Oguri's ability and understands what her presence could mean. At the same time, she represents an institution built on rules that are supposed to apply equally. Oguri has earned a place through performance, but the system says that earning it now does not change what was decided earlier. I liked seeing Oguri push against Rudolph because it reveals something different in both of them. Oguri is normally direct and uncomplicated, but here she is angry because effort has reached a wall that effort cannot break. Rudolph is powerful, respected, and used to carrying authority, yet even she cannot simply declare that the rules no longer matter. Their disagreement is not hero against villain. It is an exceptional person colliding with a structure that was not prepared for her. Oguri does not receive the exception she wants. She misses the race, and no later victory can return that exact opportunity. That matters. The series allows the loss to remain a loss. But after Oguri, the rule changes, making room for future runners who arrive through a similar path. There is something quietly powerful about that. Oguri is denied the benefit of the change she causes. She opens a door that she will never personally walk through. Her presence forces the system to admit that its old assumptions were incomplete, and the next outsider will have a chance because Oguri was impossible to ignore. By this point, Cinderella Gray has already given me enough reasons to care about Oguri. Then Tamamo Cross arrives and changes the energy of the entire series. Tamamo does not feel like another obstacle placed in the protagonist's path. She feels like a natural disaster with a personality. She is loud, proud, unpredictable, and completely aware that she belongs at the top. When she begins moving through a race, the atmosphere changes before the result does. Everyone else still appears to be competing, but Tamamo looks like she has decided that the race is over. Her zone is one of my favorite things in the anime. Calling it an ultimate ability almost feels more accurate emotionally than calling it a racing state. When Tamamo activates it, she does not merely gain speed. The entire presentation tells us that a limit has been broken. Her movement becomes violent, sharp, and almost impossible for the other runners to answer. She does not pass them one by one. She tears through the race. What makes Tamamo so effective is that her power never feels empty. She carries hunger, pride, and a history that makes every display of dominance feel earned. Her smaller frame only makes the contrast stronger. She may not look like the most overwhelming runner before the race begins, but once she finds that final gear, she becomes the standard everyone else is chasing. That history matters because Tamamo did not grow up surrounded by comfort or certainty. Her childhood was shaped by scarcity, by the feeling that every meal, every opportunity, and every small kindness had weight. She learned early what it meant to want more, not out of greed, but because she understood what it was like to have very little. That is why her hunger never feels like a simple personality trait. It is tied to where she came from. Tamamo runs with the urgency of someone who does not take success for granted, and every victory feels like a way of repaying the people who believed in her before the rest of the country knew her name. Her strength becomes more moving once we understand that. The white lightning image is spectacular, but underneath it is a girl who knows exactly what it means to climb from nothing. When she tears through the field, it does not feel like effortless dominance. What feels like years of hunger, pride, and gratitude finally being released at full speed. Oguri needs someone like Tamamo. Until they meet, Oguri's talent often feels like a force that the world is slowly learning to recognize. Tamamo is different. She already stands where Oguri wants to go. She's not impressed simply because Oguri is unusual. She makes Oguri prove that being a monster in Kasamatsu means something against the strongest runner in Japan. Their first major confrontation works because Oguri pushes Tamamo further than most competitors can. For a moment, it feels possible that the new gray star might already be ready to take the crown. Then Tamamo reaches the zone and reminds everyone why she is considered the best. Oguri loses, but the defeat does not make her feel small. It proves that she has finally found a rival capable of revealing how far she still has to climb. I love rivalries where both characters become more complete, because the other exists. Tamamo gives Oguri a visible summit. Oguri gives Tamamo a reason to stop treating victory as something inevitable. They do not only want to defeat each other, they want the other person to arrive at full strength, because anything less would make the answer feel incomplete. The second core expands that idea by giving important moments to runners who could easily have remained supporting characters. This is where Cinderella Gray becomes more than the story of Oguri collecting victories. The anime begins showing that every runner is carrying a private story, and any one of them can become the main character when the track exposes what she wants most. Obey Your Master is one of the best examples. At first, she appears easier to dismiss than the other international competitors. Her public image does not suggest the same overwhelming threat as Tamamo, but that impression is exactly what she wants. She studies the field, conceals her true ability, and waits until everyone has already decided what kind of runner she is. Her zone feels completely different from Tamamo's. Tamamo overwhelms the race through explosive force. Obey controls it through patience and intelligence. She does not waste herself proving that she can answer every challenge immediately. She saves the truth for the moment when revealing it will decide everything. That is why her victory works for me, even though she defeats the characters I was already supporting. It does not feel like the story cheating to create a surprise. It feels like the reward for a runner who understood herself better than everyone else understood her. She knew what kind of race she needed, allowed the others to underestimate her, and transformed that misunderstanding into her greatest advantage. For one episode, Obey Your Master becomes the hero of her own story. We understand the frustration behind her reinvention, the discipline required to hide her strength, and the courage needed to trust a plan that no one else can see. When her zone activates, it is not only a visual spectacle, it is the moment when the version of herself she built in private finally becomes visible to the world. Cinderella Gray repeatedly does this with its rivals. It allows them to want victory as intensely as Oguri does. They are not standing on the track to make the protagonist look impressive. They have their own pride, their own preparation, and their own reasons to believe that this race belongs to them. Because of that, losing to them can still feel satisfying. Dicta Striker may be the clearest example of why this approach matters. She has the aggression and confidence of someone who refuses to be treated as a secondary name. Even when the story's largest rivalry belongs to Oguri and Tamamo, Dicta runs as if accepting a supporting role would be a betrayal of herself. Her moment in the final race impressed me because it is not necessary for the obvious conclusion. The anime could focus entirely on Oguri chasing Tamamo and still deliver a dramatic ending. Instead, Dicta reaches her own limit and activates the zone as well. For a few moments, the race acknowledges the size of her desire. That matters because Dicta does not need to win for the moment to be real. Her zone is not a promise that the narrative will suddenly make her the champion. It is proof that her effort, ambition, and pain have reached the same extraordinary level as the stars around her. The series gives her the dignity of transcendence, without pretending that transcendence guarantees victory. This is what I think the zone represents at its best. It is not simply a special move that belongs to the strongest characters. It is the visible form of complete commitment. The runner's body, memory, instinct, and reason for competing become aligned for one decisive stretch. Everything she has been holding returns at once, and the race becomes a direct expression of who she is. That is why each zone feels personal. Tamamo's is overwhelming because she runs like a force that refuses to be contained. Obey's is controlled because she has built her entire opportunity through restraint. Dicta's is defiant because she refuses to disappear from a race dominated by legends. And then there is Oguri. For much of the story, Oguri appears like the character most naturally suited to reach the zone. She has the talent, the body, and the impossible acceleration. Yet, she cannot simply force it to happen. Watching Tamamo and Obey reach that state makes her aware that there is still a place beyond her current strength. And for perhaps the first time, she is afraid that she may not be able to enter it. I like that the anime allows Oguri to struggle with this. The protagonist does not unlock the ultimate state first and teach everyone else what it means. She watches her rivals reach it, loses to them, and begins questioning what she lacks. Her greatest obstacle is no longer whether she can run faster. It is whether she understands herself deeply enough to know what she is running toward. That question becomes urgent when Tamamo announces that their next great confrontation will also be her last. Oguri thought their rivalry had only just begun. She imagined more races, more answers, and more chances to reach the person waiting at the summit. Suddenly, time closes around them. There will be one final race, and whatever remains unsaid has to be expressed there. That is what makes Tamamo's retirement feel so tragic. She does not leave after slowly fading from relevance. She leaves while she is still the summit, just as Oguri has finally become the rival capable of reaching her. Their relationship seems ready to become the defining rivalry of an entire era. And then the story tells us that they may only have one true answer left. For Oguri, the pain is obvious. She has only just found the person who can force her beyond every familiar limit. But the tragedy also belongs to Tamamo. After fighting her way from hardship to the top of Japan, she finally meets someone who can make victory feel uncertain again. The rival she has been waiting for arrives at the exact moment her own time is running out. That changes the final race completely. It is no longer only about deciding who is stronger. It becomes a race against disappearance. Oguri is trying to reach Tamamo before the chance to run beside her is gone, while Tamamo is trying to leave behind one final performance worthy of everything it took to get there. The final Arima Kinen feels emotional because it is crowded with reasons. Dicta wants to prove that she belongs beside the strongest. Tamamo wants to leave the track as the runner everyone remembers. Oguri wants to defeat her rival, but she is also terrified that the person who gave shape to her ambition is about to disappear. When the race reaches its limit, Tamamo activates the zone and becomes that unstoppable force one last time. Dicta reaches it too, dragging herself into a level the race cannot ignore. Oguri is surrounded by the proof that everyone else has found an answer, while she is still searching for hers. Then, the story returns to the beginning. Oguri remembers her mother. She remembers weak legs, uncertain steps, Kasamatsu, Kitahara, March, and every person who helped her arrive at this track. The answer is not that she wants fame more than everyone else. It is not even that she needs to become the strongest. Oguri runs because she can. That idea sounds simple, but simplicity is exactly why it works for her. Before titles, rivals, national expectations, and impossible records, there was a child whose body made every step meaningful. Oguri does not need to invent a new reason at the end of the story. She needs to remember the first one. When Oguri finally reaches the zone, it feels different from a normal protagonist power-up. The moment does not give her something she never had. It reconnects every version of her. The child learning to walk, the silent runner from Kasamatsu, the girl who hesitated because winning meant leaving, and the rival chasing Tamamo all become the same person. The Gray Phantom is not born from emptiness. It is made from every person, promise, defeat, and step that followed Oguri onto the track. Her final battle with Tamamo works because the race becomes more than a contest between the strongest runners. For a moment, they seem almost grateful that the other exists. Tamamo has found someone capable of chasing her all the way to the end. Oguri has found the person who forced her to understand what running means. Oguri wins, but I do not love the scene only because she wins. I love it because the victory answers the entire story. The girl who once could barely walk reaches the highest state of running by, remembering that movement itself was her first miracle. The rival who seemed impossible to catch gives her one final reason to become complete. That is the heart of Cinderella Gray for me. It is not a story where every emotional moment exists to make the protagonist look stronger. Kitahara becomes important because he is willing to let Oguri leave. Rudolph becomes important because Oguri forces the system she represents to change. Tamamo becomes unforgettable because her strength gives Oguri a summit worth chasing. Obey and Dicta become memorable because their own desires are treated as seriously as the heroes. Every runner has a reason, and the anime respects those reasons even when only one person can cross the finish line first. That is why the races feel personal. The track removes excuses, but it does not remove history. Every character brings her past into the final stretch. When the zone appears, we are not only watching speed, we are watching everything that character could not express in ordinary words. Maybe that is why a series about horse girls running in circles can hit this hard. Beneath the spectacle, Cinderella Gray understands something very human. Moving forward is rarely only about reaching a destination. Sometimes we run because someone believed in us. Sometimes we run because someone is waiting ahead. Sometimes we run because stopping would mean accepting a version of ourselves that no longer feels true. And sometimes, like Oguri, we run because there was once a time when taking even one step was not guaranteed. The finish line matters. Winning matters. But the reason a person keeps moving after the pain begins matters more. That is why they keep running. And that is why I love Cinderella Gray.